also, you've got people that are on Donald Trump's team now that were making the exact same criticisms. In fact, playground politics is to keep looking back 10 years. We're looking forward. We're saying we know we need to work with Donald Trump.
The Labour Party never look back in time and dig up something offensive that somebody said.
I mean, unfortunately, obviously, some people do this. The point is you've got Lord Mandelson. This man is the right person for the job. You know, not just with the 5 decades of experience, which is really, really important, but also he is someone, you know, the fact that his grandfather was in, Clement Attlee's post-war government, he served under Churchill. You know, Donald Trump loves that stuff. He loves the royal family. He loves the English tradition that only this country has.
Another thing about Peter Mandelson, he was a frothing at the mouth Remainer. Absolutely adores Brussels, everything the European Union stands for. Donald Trump can't stand the European Union. He said it's a cartel. He wants to break it up. He wants to impose tariffs on it. How can Mandelson juggle those two balls? How can he spin those two plates? How can he keep Brussels happy, which is, let's face it, the emotional ties strongest between the Labour Party and Brussels than it is with the Labour Party and Washington? And maybe that's where Farage could be useful, because clearly, obviously, his allegiance is more to Washington than Brussels. But you don't think this is going to happen, do you? You think this is smoke and mirrors, it's performative?
I don't think it is going to happen. I think it's really important to see that Lord Mandelson, is a force to be reckoned with. He is a strong leader. Whether or not, do you know what's really interesting? If you have David Cameron on here, whether or not they agree with his political views, they will acknowledge this is a man with 5 decades of experience. He knows what he's doing. He is going to build a strong relationship with Donald Trump, and I think he's going to do what we need, which is, making sure we're negotiating so we don't have those high tariffs, and I think that is, absolutely fundamental. And when we're talking about, all this other stuff around Nigel Farage, look, it's great. Nigel can have his own relationship with Donald Trump, that's fine. I don't think the Labour Party need him.
That's the point. He has got a good relationship with Donald Trump, and no one from the Labour Party has. You can't say a 2-hour meal is the foundations of a special relationship.
And just coming back to your point about Brussels, look, the point is, look, there's a whole number of people, both in the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, that ultimately did believe in Europe and still believe in Europe on a whole lot of ways. But the point is the British people voted to leave, and it is absolutely right that we respect that. I do not believe we're going back in time, and I also think it is absolutely possible for someone to build good links with both Europe and America. And when we are talking about the businessman in this country, which is absolutely what we should be for, they want us to build good relationships with both, and that is absolutely fundamental. You've got to think about those people whose businesses have struggled because of us coming out of Europe.
Well, there's certainly struggle with a £2.5 billion, £25 billion national insurance hike, and I digress. Susie Stride, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, what a year it's been for the ECHR. We've seen foreign offenders released, 20,000 arrived by small boats since Keir Starmer's been in power, and many, many more. Of course, this all comes as a Romanian man was jailed for violent robbery but can't be deported, of course, under ECHR rules. Now, would the UK be better off leaving the ECHR? Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP, Neil O'Brien. Neil, welcome to the show. A pleasure to have your company. Neil, I saw a tremendous video you put out on social media, a sort of greatest hits of what the ECHR has achieved. We've just got some of it on our screens now. This is basically a greatest hits of what happened under the ECHR this year. It goes through month by month. We can see there, starting this year, the ECHR helps all different types of people. It goes on to start with, here is the Telegraph story in January, a story of an Albanian migrant jailed for cannabis farming who would breach his human rights if he were deported. It goes on and on through the various months. Neil O'Brien, back to you. You're obviously not a big fan of the ECHR, and you've compiled the greatest hits or misses there. Do you think it's time to leave?
Oh, yes, I've argued for that for quite a long time. And I thought I'd put this video together just to bring together these things that we see week after week, day after day in the papers. You see these cases and you know that they are happening all the time. But I thought it would be useful to bring some of them, just some of them, into one place. And for every month of the year, you can see some horrendous judgment. You can see people who absolutely should not be in this country being allowed to stay in absurd decisions. And if you'd have said that this would have happened to the people who signed up to this in 1950, they would have been totally horrified. It was never intended to be a charter for people doing all these terrible things in the way that it's become.
And yet, Neil O'Brien, there seems to be a schism within the Conservative Party currently around that position. Robert Jenrick, of course, was in favour of your position. Kemi Badenoch has more reservations. Nigel Farage's Reform Party, of course, is stepping into that territory, saying that absolutely they would plan to leave the ECHR. Do you think this is so important we need to put it to a referendum?
No, I just think we should leave. I don't think we should have a referendum. I think we should. And Kemi Badenoch's been very clear that you're going to review every aspect of our immigration system. She said it is not working, and everything, including leaving the ECHR, is part of her review. And I've heard her be very, very sceptical about it. And rightly so. We see not just these terrible cases where people have committed heinous criminal offences and then done special pleading in the court, said, oh, you know, I've met someone, or I've had a child here, or I'll struggle to reintegrate in my home country, and then being allowed to stay and sometimes going on to commit further offences. It's not just those kind of problems, but you see other kinds of problems, including for serving soldiers. You saw Ben Wallace, the former MOD minister, pointing out that you've had cases where people have ended up being killed because of the legal complexities of ECHR. Effectively shutting off other avenues for our troops. So in every type of activity, every part of government, ECHR is having huge effects. And the most obvious, of course, is the case of illegal immigration, where people are using, particularly Article 8, the right to family life, in ways that, again, were never intended. That is enabling loads and loads of people to stay here who wouldn't otherwise be able to stay. And that, of course, encourages more people to come. And that's why we've seen now more than 20,000 people arrived in just a few short months since Keir Starmer took over, about a fifth more than the same period last year. So much for smashing the gangs. Actually, the gangs are smashing Keir Starmer. The truth is that as long as these people know that they're able to rely on ECHR and panoply of other rights, as long as they know that if you can make it to the UK, you can stay, then they'll keep coming in ever greater numbers.
And Neil, do you think we're heading towards a dangerous situation around defending the human rights of those who many people believe, quite rightly, have little right to be in a country? Of course, and now I'm talking about Germany. Taleb al-Abdel Mohsen, of course, the Saudi terrorist committing that, using the car as a weapon, killing 5, injuring 200, killing 9. 5, injuring 205. And there's a lot of evidence there that he was allowed to remain in Germany because of his human rights being abused if he were deported. And what steps into that void, as we're seeing in Germany this afternoon, there's a political rally by the AfD. It gives rise to people rising up, a new insurgent right wing, because there's a feeling that the law just isn't taking care of people within their own countries, and human rights so often seems to be defending those who wish to harm us.
Well, quite. And some of the cases that I drew attention to in this country, including a man who battered someone to death in the back of an ambulance and was then allowed to stay in this country because of his ECHR rights. People see these things and they rightly think, this is completely unsustainable, this is impossible. And unless mainstream politicians grip these issues, then of course what you'll see is a political kind of meltdown. And sometimes I do think we are a bit insular about these arguments. Sometimes I think, oh, we're just having these arguments in Britain, but of course, all across Europe now, you see the same arguments about illegal immigration, about the way that human rights are being abused, about the way that hospitality is being abused. And so actually, in lots of other ways, we can see a little bit into the future by seeing some of the debates that are happening elsewhere in Europe. And we've got to learn the lessons from those, some of the things that are happening. I mean, Sweden's obviously a very extreme case where mass illegal immigration, mass migration from countries that are war zones has taken what was previously regarded as a very peaceful and almost paradisal country and turned it into a place of chaos and no-go areas of incredible levels of violence. And so that is why we are seeing these kind of reactions all across Europe. And it's not too late to fix these issues. It's not impossible to fix these issues, but we do need to be very clear that we will fundamentally change everything about our system for illegal immigration and for human rights too. The ECHR, of course, is not the only problem. No one's saying it's the only problem, but it is a big part of the problem. The way that these things have just been twisted and changed beyond all recognition.
Neil, as I have you here, could I very quickly ask you, Nigel Farage and Peter Mandelson, a marriage made in heaven or a marriage made in hell?
I think the appointment does sort of highlight the difficulty when you appoint professional politicians rather than professional diplomats to these roles. I mean, Karen Pierce, current ambassador, very widely respected. But of course, if you appoint someone who's a politician, they'll always have some political background. And so it's proving I mean, I think that the Labour government have, on a diplomatic point of view, got off to a terrible start. I mean, first we had this whole fiasco about the Chagos Islands, where not only were we giving away territory in exchange for nothing, we were offering to pay them. And then the deal seems to be faltering because they want to give money. And then we had David Lammy's chaos over welcoming what some people regard as ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh. I mean, it's just misstep after misstep. And I think it will be tough for Peter. I'm sure he'll try hard, but it'll be a tough start.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us today. Neil O'Brien, Merry Christmas to you, and thanks for joining us here on GB News. Thank you. Now it's time now for our biggest and greatest Great British giveaway this year, and your chance to win 50 grand in tax-free cash is the biggest cash prize we've ever given away. Could be yours in time for Christmas, and here's how. Good luck, and soon we'll bring you live pictures as Germany's rising right-wing party, the AfD, hold a major rally in Magdeburg. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The birth rate in Britain has sunk to 1.49, well below replacement rate. Yet policies pursued by both major parties are still to spend huge sums to encourage parents back to their work when their children are still at preschool age. Should we not be helping parents to spend longer at home, asks his new book, whilst recognising that in an age of sex equality, the question is fraught. David Goodhart joins me now.
We undervalue the domestic realm, and that has led to lots of the most negative trends in British society. About half of children in the UK are not living with both of their biological parents by the age of 14. We have, of families with dependent children, about 24-25% are single-parent households. Mainly mothers, and they're doing, valiant work. But of course, it means you don't have the investment in children that a two-parent family can give. I mean, the reason why it's a care dilemma is that a lot of these negative trends are also kind of intimately related to positive things, like that movement of women into work, the fact that women are no longer so defined by marriage and motherhood, the fact that women and men are freer to leave unhappy relationships. And the challenge for modern liberal societies is, how we hold on to those freedoms but get a better balance, which means, I think, investing more in the domestic realm. We spend a total now of £9 billion on childcare subsidies. Why not give that subsidy direct to young parents so they could then choose whether to subsidise themselves, as it were, to be able to afford to stay at home, or to give it to a nursery, or to give it to granny, or to keep it in the home.
GB News.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:27 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. And tributes flood in for the 9-year-old boy, André Gleisner, who has been named as the youngest victim in the German Christmas market terror attack. And the attack left 5 dead and over 200 injured, with some remaining in a critical condition. And later on this afternoon, in fact, in the next few moments, we'll bring you live pictures as Germany's rising right-wing party, the Alternative for Deutschland, will hold a rally in Magdeburg, the site of that attack. And to discuss this, I'm now joined by GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. Truly a crime that has sickened the entire world, made even more heartbreaking by the naming of this beautiful boy.
Yes, indeed, and the prime suspect still being held and expected to be charged with 5 counts of murder and hundreds of counts of attempted murder. We are learning more about this individual, a Saudi national who arrived in Germany in 2006 and tried to claim asylum. In 2016, he was finally granted refugee status. But the more worrying aspect of this story are the repeated, it seems, missed opportunities on the part of German authorities to get a handle on the kind of threat that this individual posed. As far back as his arrival in 2006, the Saudi government was making representations to the Germans, sending various diplomatic cables, as was United Arab Emirates, about this person's extreme views. They wanted him to stand charges of people trafficking back in Saudi Arabia. The German government clearly did not agree to those demands by Saudi Arabia. Then there was another notable incident in 2013 when, as an asylum seeker, he was in discussions, in a row basically, with the local authority in northern Germany about his living expenses that the state would provide for him. And at one point, he was threatening to commit suicide. He threatened authorities with carrying out an act that would gather international attention and specifically referenced the Boston Marathon bombing that took place in that year in 2013. Well, the next year, German authorities had a meeting with him. He was the subject of a de-radicalisation conversation to try to determine just what the potential risks were that he posed. Now, the German authorities, assessed him as not posing a risk of actually carrying out any attack like this. He was fined for the threats he was making to that local authority in northern Germany. And then fast forward, Martin, to just last year when the authorities were alerted again to social media posts that he was making that again appeared to threaten the population in Germany. Now, all of these incidents appear to have either not been acted on or just acted on in a very limited fashion, to the point where we got to last Friday, where this terrible attack took place at this Christmas market in Magdeburg.
Mark, there are still a huge amount of questions being asked as well about the motives of this individual, claiming to be a radical atheist, claiming to be anti-Islamic, and yet reports emerging of him harassing and pursuing other former Muslims, and the modus operandi of his attack having all the hallmarks of an Islamist attack. Do we know the full story about this individual yet, Talib al-Abdel Mosul, or do you think yet there's more to emerge?
well, it seems with the information that's out there that he was certainly against the regime in Saudi Arabia, but at the same time, he was also very critical of the government in Germany for not doing enough, as he saw it, to protect and offer shelter to asylum seekers coming from Saudi Arabia. So a mixed sort of viewpoint in terms of, yes, there's hostility towards Saudi Arabia, but also a growing hostility and potential threat to that adopted country of his, the country that gave him shelter when he fled Saudi Arabia. And this is the biggest concern of all for many people, I think, in Germany. Yes, you can get caught up in, was he an Islamist, was he an anti-Islamist? That matters, I think, less than the fact that this was someone who came to the country as an asylum seeker who was granted the protection of that country, but yet it seems he will stand accused in a court of law of carrying out the most horrific attack against those people in his adopted country. And that does concern very many people in Germany, and that's why parties like the ADF in Germany are gaining support, because there is a great deal of concern at uncontrolled mass migration and the potential security risks that brings, not necessarily being able to get a proper handle on the people that are coming to Germany and the potential risks that they pose.
Mark White, an excellent summary as ever, and all eyes will be on Magdeburg around about 4 p.m. for that AfD rally. And in fact, we'll speak with a former MEP to ask what next for Germany, what next for the political landscape. Mark White, thank you very much as ever. Thank you. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including the latest GDP figures showed the UK economy flatlined in the third quarter. We was promised stability, but is Labour's plan for growth simply falling apart? But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Your headlines at 3:33. The UK economy flatlined in the third quarter of the year, with revised figures showing no growth in GDP between July and September. The Office for National Statistics partly blamed weaker trading in bars and restaurants, while businesses warned the country is headed for the worst of all worlds amid fears of reduced output and hiring. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the economic challenges are huge, but vows her budget will deliver long-term growth. Now to some breaking news coming to us from the US. The suspect accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has pleaded not guilty to 11 murder and terror charges. Luigi Mangione is facing 11 charges, including first-degree murder and terrorism. If convicted, the 26-year-old could face life in prison without parole. In addition to the state's case, a federal case against Mangione is running concurrently. One of the charges, murder through use of a firearm, would make him eligible for the death penalty if he's convicted. However, his defence attorneys called the situation highly unusual, noting conflicting theories between the state and federal cases. Back in the UK, King Charles will deliver this year's Christmas message from the Fitzrovia Chapel, a former hospital chapel in central London. It's the first time in over a decade the speech isn't recorded at a royal residence, with the King choosing the location to highlight healthcare workers and foster unity between faiths. The ornate 19th century chapel was once part of the Middlesex Hospital and now hosts exhibitions and community events. This year's message comes as the King continues treatment following a cancer diagnosis earlier in 2023. The speech will air on Christmas Day at 3 p.m. across TV and radio. In other news, shop staff are facing a Christmas crime wave, with 670 shoplifting offences a day going unsolved in the past year. New figures show a 38% rise in unresolved cases since 2019, with more than half closed without identifying a suspect. The Liberal Democrats are warning the trend leaves shop workers vulnerable during their busiest season. And Morrison's has cut the price of items including turkeys and champagne for all shoppers after a system glitch caused chaos, with loyalty discounts failing and Christmas deliveries cancelled. Customers reported their more card savings didn't apply at tills, and some deliveries or click and collect orders were running late on one of the busiest shopping days of the year. The supermarket's website also experienced outages. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2527 and €1.2054. The price of gold is £2,083.81 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,080 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud has arrived and will continue to spread across the rest of the UK during the rest of today, bringing drizzle and hill fog, but also bringing much milder weather in time for Christmas. This warm front is the culprit. That's what's bringing the thick and low cloud to much of the UK through the rest of the day, along with outbreaks of mostly light and patchy rain and drizzle, some heavier bursts particularly running along northern Scotland. And by the end of the night, we're all in this gloomy but mild airflow from the Atlantic. So grey skies, hill fog, patchy drizzle first thing, but temperatures of 8 to 12 Celsius. So unusually mild as we begin Christmas Eve compared with the time of year and compared with Christmas Eves gone by. A lot of that cloud will stick around as well throughout the morning. A few breaks in the clouds, some brighter interludes there to the east of higher ground, so parts of the Midlands and perhaps eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, seeing some brighter skies, but western Scotland certainly seeing a lot of thick cloud and outbreaks of persistent, at times moderate or heavy outbreaks of rain and drizzle. The drizzle, though, and the more persistent wet weather mostly confined to western Scotland by the afternoon. There will be a few spots over the Pennines, parts of Northern Ireland as well, but the further south and east you are, the drier it will be. There'll be some brightness coming through, and with this mild wind direction, temperatures widely of 12 or 13 Celsius, could even see 14 or 15 degrees in one or two spots. So after that mild afternoon, we go into a very mild Christmas night. A lot of cloud cover, that cloud low covering the hills of the north and the west, and it's going to bring further drizzle, particularly for western Scotland, with a strengthening wind by the start of Christmas Day. But Christmas Day itself, very mild, mostly dry.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Good afternoon. There's some queues in Cumbria. The northbound M6 from Catalan to Carlisle South. Junction 41 to 42, 2 lanes combed off whilst a collision's dealt with. Slow southbound M6 at the Croft interchange 21A for an earlier broken down car there. Stop start southbound M1 around Sheffield, 30 down to 29 in the roadworks. Now there's been a collision on the southbound M5, so big queues before Worcester at 6. 2 lanes are out heavy before junction 5 also. The northbound side slow back to Worcester at 7. Queues west in South Wales for the M4 to the Bringlass tunnels to Newport. Anti-clock M25 queuing to the Dartford tunnels. And there's a breakdown in Hampshire affecting the westbound M27. A lane out junction 12 towards Fareham at 11. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:40 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the latest GDP figures released this morning show that the UK economy has flatlined in the third quarter. GDP stagnated by 0% between July to September, revised down from the estimate of a mere 0.1% growth and down from 0.5% in Q2. Yet, looking back, this is what Rachel Reeves had to say back in 2023.
David Cameron, when he stood in the general election in 2015, promised stability and said that Labour offered chaos. Well, I'm afraid since then, all we've seen in Britain is one crisis after another, chaos upon chaos, the mini budget last year that crashed financial markets, put pensions in peril and sent mortgage rates soaring. And if this Conservative government has learnt lessons from that mini budget last year, they will vote with Labour to stop this ever happening again.
Pensions in peril, the economy crashing. It's almost like, well, that's what's happening now. We can now speak with the economist Andrew Lillico. Andrew, welcome to the show. A bit of fun, but isn't it funny how in opposition everything is easy? In power, everything is far more difficult. We promise stability, and yet the Confederation of British Industry today saying we are promised the worst of all times. The Bank of England saying we are looking at flatlining and inflation even rising in the new year. All the chaos we were threatened with under the Conservative Party, it's happening under Labour, isn't it?
Yes, well, it's a tricky situation. Some of it is the government's fault, but not all of it. I think that the main culprit here for the current downturn is actually the Bank of England. So what happened was that the Bank of England raised interest rates too high and they kept them there for too long. And in 2023, that led to a very considerable monetary contraction. In fact, an unprecedented one for many decades, about 4% of the year to September 2023. Now, when you have that kind of event, it takes about 18 months for that to feed through into the effects on the wider economy. So we'd expect the peak consequence of that to come in March 2025, so this coming spring. And I think that that's part of what you're seeing with the CBI saying that they're expecting a considerable downturn in activity. We've actually seen some of that effect, I would say, over perhaps the past 9 months, because it was a while that we had that monetary contraction in place. So the initial effect of it was that inflation went a little bit below expectations. And so that, I think, led to the real economy growing a little bit faster earlier than the year that was expected. But that isn't going to be carrying on. And inflation is now about meeting expectations. It's ticking up from base effects, but it's basically pretty stable. And we're now seeing the real economy effect of that. I think we will see that continue through, and it will probably get quite a bit worse into the next quarter. Another thing going on is that, of course, we have Trump coming in, and he's intending to put in some 10 to 20% tariffs on international imports into the US. US is a big export market for the UK. Now, Trump would prefer to exempt the UK in some way from those tariffs, but Starmer's apparent position is that he wants to show solidarity with the EU. One of the consequences may be that we end up suffering more from those Trump tariffs than we would otherwise do. And the third factor is that taxes are now so high that they're bearing down on economic activity, and the attempt to raise them even further by Reeves, they're already too high actually under the Tories to be sustainable, but Reeves tried to raise them even further, and that's failing, and she's likely to come back again in the spring. We're seeing now the IFS, for example, predicting today that she will come back in the spring and try to raise taxes even further. I think that will fail as well. We've passed the point at which the economy can, on any sustainable basis, provide even the amount of tax which the policymakers are hoping, let alone even more. So what happens when they put taxes up even higher is it drives the economy down and drives down those tax revenues. So it's those three factors together, I would say, are the reason why we're having the consequences we are.
Andrew, the Confederation of British Industry saying business output and hiring both expected to fall sharply in the first 3 months of 2025. Yesterday, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was called the Grinch because billions of pounds will be taken away from charities. Because guess what? If you hike national insurance and a lot of people on minimum wage, the charitable sector is being hit now. 45 pence in every pound given to charity actually goes to the Chancellor. And we're also looking at inflation upticking, the worst of all worlds is being called, and also 56 quid a year on green taxes, pushing up the prices of our groceries. This sounds like a country teetering on the precipice of a sharp downward turn. Am I being pessimistic?
No, I think you're quite right that things could potentially go much worse. It's possible that over this Parliament we end up in the situation of some kind of fiscal or financial crisis, because where we've got to is that the tax levels are so high that we can't generate extra tax revenues from them. And some of the measures which the government feels forced into providing when it is trying to get into extra taxes are actually amongst the very worst in terms of their impacts. So national insurance, employers' contribution to national insurance is well known to be the tax most likely to induce additional unemployment. And I think think that when you see those hiring intentions being very negative over the next quarter, that's not a coincidence. All taxes are bad, but employers' national insurance is a particularly bad one. And there's a possibility that in this situation in which you have spending going ever higher, but you can't raise the taxes, that eventually that leads to a crisis. It's not certain, but I definitely think that that's a risk.
OK, Andrew, we have the over there. Andrew Lineker, thank you very much, and a Merry Christmas. Excellent analysis there. Thank you, as ever, for joining us on GB News. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun, and who can blame you, then here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across southern parts of Europe over the next few days. Mostly fine in the west, more unsettled further east. Could see a few showers on Christmas Eve across the Canaries, but for much of Iberia, it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around here. And then we run into more unsettled conditions across southeastern parts of Europe. Some wind, some rain, even some hill snow in places. And that east-west split continues as we go through the Christmas period. Further unsettled weather to come in the east, generally fine the further west you are.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Now, brace yourselves, because the UK is set to be hotter than Greece on Christmas Day. But don't get too excited, you won't be needing your trunks. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
What about train Wi-Fi? The Times, it's so funny the Times did this story, because I was on the train yesterday trying to do some work and connecting to the Wi-Fi, and it happens all the time. It just doesn't work. It's pathetic. And then I opened the Times, and they've done a massive investigation. Loads of different rail routes from north to south.
Was that the James Bond thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I think, well, that passenger got through, or almost got through, one episode one James Bond movie in 8 hours.
But you know, it's interesting. We call it train Wi-Fi, but it isn't. It's just really a SIM card on a train, really. So if your own phone's not going to get signal, why would we assume that the train's going to have signal? It just doesn't work like that. Unless you're in Japan or South Korea, whose infrastructure is infinitely better than ours, you're just not going to get signal. You have to download those films way before you get on this.
There is technology that can help with that. You know, there really is. If they found ways to put it underground, they can get it on ground and get you going. I definitely think, you know, with the price that we're paying for these tickets, they can get the Wi-Fi going. There is technology.
That's why it's so frustrating, isn't
Call
it?
Elon, get a Starlink, let's go.
If you're a passenger paying hundreds of pounds for a season ticket or whatever you call it, and, you know, commute to work every single day, and you're paying all this money, and you can't.
It's so expensive.
Wi-Fi.
You'd expect Wi-Fi at the basic. Yeah, exactly.
But it happens with phone signal as well. I'll be walking down London in Park Lane or somewhere else, or down on the south coast. I just don't have phone signal, and I think to myself, what on earth is going on?
Doesn't it feel like 5G's made it worse, though?
Yeah.
Because I feel like 4G, that didn't happen so much, but 5G just feels like...
Yeah, and then I always get this little E in the top corner of my phone, and I don't get any signal. I think it's got worse over the past couple of years. Yeah, especially with 5G. I agree with that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 10 to 4 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, are you hoping for a white Christmas? Well, tough luck, because put that on hold for another year, as it could be hotter in the UK than Rome and Istanbul and even Corfu, or is that Corfu? Because the weather is expected to hit highs of 12 degrees, with even having spells of sunshine. Big question, of course, is that just warm weather, or is it something to do with, climate change? And joining me now to discuss this is the leader of the Climate Party, Ed Gemmell. Ed, Merry Christmas. Always a pleasure to have your company. Are you going to tell me now that this inclement weather is all down to the world about to end?
I think, as always, we have to say that any individual event, we don't know if it's to do with climate change, but it's made more likely. This isn't the hottest day, the hottest Christmas we'll ever have had. We have had one over 15 degrees before, but it's up there with them. And when you think we're hotter than Greece, that's going to make some heads turn. We've seen a pretty incredible year. We've seen massive rainfalls and storms in the UK, storms with, up to 100 miles an hour of winds. In Dubai and in Valencia, massive amounts of water coming down, a year to a year and a half of rainfall in literally hours, up to 24 hours. A lot is changing. The weather is getting worse and climate change is driving it. 10 years of the warmest years on the planet, and that's what it's coming to. You can't say that us having a warmer Christmas than Greece is to do with that, but clearly it's part of the whole trend.
But Ed, it used to be called global warming, and now most years are wetter than Noah's Ark.
No, absolutely. And part of that is, as the globe warms, more water evaporates, gets into the atmosphere, and has to come down. And it comes down harder and quicker. And you may have been seeing over the last few months and over the last year reports that are saying we could lose the Gulf Stream and the amok that it's part of it. And if we lose that over the next few decades, actually, we could get colder in this country while other parts of the globe are warming significantly. So what we've got to do is take action on it, Martin. We've got to do it. We've got to do it very quickly. And it links with even what was being said by your last guest related to the economy. As the temperatures go up, our economy is bombing. And if we want to get on and start driving up our economy, we should be dealing with net zero. The whole of the rest of the world is...
We're already doing that. It's adding 56 quid a year to grocery bills. It's meaning we can't afford to drive our cars. Net zero policies aren't helping. They're making us poorer.
Yeah, well, the 56 quid actually is being, reported wrongly. It was already being paid by local authorities. Look, I'm a councillor in Buckinghamshire. That's something that we were being required to do. And quite rightly, it's now been put on the people that actually produce it and manufacture it. So that's obviously...
That'll get passed on to the punters. We'll all be paying more for our stuff.
I'm afraid to say we all pay for, our local government taxes as well. So to some extent, it doesn't change, but it's putting it in the right place where innovation and competition in industry can actually, drive change on it. That's clearly the right place to put that. Right. I'm not Labour, remember. I'm not defending their policies, just saying that that's a sensible move away from local authorities who are very, very stretched and unable to pay for all the services they have to provide at the moment.
OK, again, we have to leave it there. Run out of time. A very, very Merry Christmas. It won't be a white Christmas, but a Merry climate change Christmas. Now then, coming up next, we'll have live pictures from Germany, the AfD rally there after that terror attack. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now is your weather, and here's Aidan McGibbon.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud has arrived and will continue to spread across the rest of the UK during the rest of today, bringing drizzle and hill fog, but also bringing much milder weather in time for Christmas. This warm front is the culprit. That's what's bringing the thick and low cloud to much of the UK through the rest of the day, along with outbreaks of mostly light and patchy rain and drizzle, some heavier bursts particularly running along northern Scotland. And by the end of the night, we're all in this gloomy but mild airflow from the Atlantic. So grey skies, hill fog, patchy drizzle first thing, but temperatures of 8 to 12 Celsius. So unusually mild as we begin Christmas Eve compared with the time of year and compared with Christmas Eves gone by. A lot of that cloud will stick around as well throughout the morning. A few well, breaks in the clouds, some brighter interludes there to the east of higher ground, so parts of the Midlands and perhaps eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, seeing some brighter skies. But western Scotland certainly seeing a lot of thick cloud and outbreaks of persistent, at times moderate or heavy outbreaks of rain and drizzle. The drizzle, though, and the more persistent wet weather mostly confined to western Scotland by the afternoon. There will be a few spots over the Pennines, parts of Northern Ireland as well. But the further south and east you are, the drier it will be. There'll be some brightness coming through. And with this mild wind direction, temperatures widely of 12 or 13 Celsius, could even see 14 or 15 degrees in one or two spots. So after that mild afternoon, we go into a very mild Christmas night. A lot of cloud cover, that cloud low covering the hills of the north and the west, and it's going to bring further drizzle, particularly for western Scotland, with a strengthening wind by the start of Christmas Day. But Christmas Day itself, very mild, mostly dry.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's queues on the northbound on the M6 side from Catalan up to Carlisle South, so junction 41 to 42 slow going. Fallen tree, an earlier collision there. That means there's a lane closure in place. Slow southbound M6 towards the M62. That's junction 21A, the Croft interchange. It follows an earlier broken down car there, though it's back on the move. Shropshire, the westbound M54 from Shifnal, junction 4 to Telford Central, junction 5. All the traffic at a stand. It's been held whilst a collision there sorted out. A big queue southbound before junction 6 on the M5 to Worcester, 2 lanes coned off. It's heavy both ways for a southbound collision. And the anti-clock M25, the exit slip coming off of Brentwood 28, part blocked and slow. There's a broken down car there. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh.
Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very, very happy afternoon. Good afternoon. It's 4 p.m. and a Merry Christmas. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. After a terrorist attack on a Magdeburg Christmas market left 9 dead and 205 injured, you can see live pictures on your screen there. We're expecting a rally from Germany's rising right-wing party, the AfD. That rally is expected to take place in the next hour. That's pictures of it in the build-up as locals call for mass deportations. We'll bring you live shots from that rally, and I'll be joined by a former AfD MEP, Mr. Gunnar Beck, to ask him What next for Germany? And will Elon Musk donate millions of dollars to help save Germany? And Nigel Farage has agreed to help US Ambassador Peter Mandelson win over Donald Trump. Is this best for Britain? And does it cement Farage's reputation as a political player, or by helping the under-fire Labour government? Is Nigel Farage helping his enemy? And Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is affronted by an angry constituent whilst handing out mince pies in West Yorkshire. Let's take a listen.
That is so two-faced. Give him a mince pie out.
Yeah. It's a nice tradition.
No. Give him a blanket, because they're freezing to death. They're freezing about.
Bar humbug, you can't even give pies away. And Reform UK's new treasurer billionaire Nick Candy says Elon Musk is just one of a number of billionaires willing to donate to the insurgent party. Candy's claiming that British politics will undergo disruption like we have never seen before. Could 2025 be the year of the Reform Revolution? And that's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Well, they had many nicknames for our Prime Minister this year. Two-tier Keir, free gear Keir, never here Keir, of course, came in, and did jet set Starmer, because the Prime Minister always seems to be out of the country. And guess what? It's just been announced this afternoon. He's taking a break in the new year. Never here Keir, won't be here in the new year. Here's a little tribute we put together here at GB News. I absolutely love that. All it's missing is the panpipes, beautiful work. We're having a bit of a joke, but of course the Prime Minister does seem to have more air miles than Richard Branson. Get in touch, let me know what you think. The way to do that is by going to gbnews.com/your say. Thank you very much. Now then, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Your top story this hour. The UK economy flatlined in the third quarter of the year, with revised figures showing no growth in GDP between July and September. The Office for National Statistics partly blamed weaker trading in bars and restaurants, while businesses warned the country is headed for the worst of all worlds amid fears of reduced output and hiring. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the economic challenges are huge, but vows her budget will deliver long-term growth. Meanwhile, Shadow Culture Secretary Stuart Andrew is pointing the finger at the Labour government, warning that a recession is increasingly likely if their policies continue.
This is a really worrying time. They talk down the economy, so it's no wonder that confidence is falling, but then they made some disastrous decisions in the budget, not least the national insurance contributions hike, which is having a real impact on confidence for businesses and what they were thinking about for their future and any investments that they were thinking for growth. And then, I obviously work very closely with charities, for example, and they are facing a significant hike in their national insurance contributions bill, totalling about £1.4 billion. To
the US now, where the suspect accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has pleaded not guilty. Luigi Mangione is facing 11 charges, including first-degree murder and terrorism. If convicted, the 26-year-old could face life in prison without parole. In addition to the state's case, a federal case against Mangione is running concurrently. One of the charges, murder through use of a firearm, would make him eligible for the death penalty if he's convicted. However, his defence attorneys called the situation highly unusual, noting conflicting theories between the state and federal cases. And back in the UK, King Charles will deliver this year's Christmas message from the Fitzrovia Chapel, a former hospital chapel in central London. It's the first time in over a decade the speech isn't recorded at a royal residence, with the King choosing the location to highlight healthcare workers and foster unity between faiths. The ornate 19th century chapel was once part of the Middlesex Hospital and now hosts exhibitions and community events. This year's message comes as the King continues treatment following a cancer diagnosis earlier in 2023. The speech will air on Christmas Day at 3 p.m. across TV and radio. In other news, a suspected arson attack has caused a large fire in Birmingham. Police say a car was deliberately set alight and rammed into a shop building in Spark Hill in the early hours of this morning, with residents describing the explosion as like a bomb going off. The blaze spread to flats above the shop, prompting evacuations. Thankfully, no injuries have been reported. Fire crews battled the flames with 10 engines, bringing the situation under control by mid-morning. West Midlands Police are urging anyone with information to come forward as investigations continue. And shop staff are facing a Christmas crime wave, with 670 shoplifting offences a day going unsolved over the past year. New figures show a 38% rise in unresolved cases since 2019, with more than half closed without identifying a suspect. The Liberal Democrats are warning the trend leaves shop workers vulnerable during their busiest season. The NHS is urging families to watch for signs of dementia as they gather this Christmas, with diagnosis in England hitting a record 500,000. Symptoms like forgetfulness, confusion about time and place, and struggling with conversations could be early warning signs. Care Minister Stephen Kinnock says an early diagnosis is vital for accessing treatment and support, while NHS highlights Christmas as a chance to notice changes in loved ones. Alzheimer's Society says 1 million people are living with dementia in the UK, but a third remain undiagnosed. Dementia was the UK's leading cause of death last year, with over 75,000 people dying from the disease. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, Britain's new ambassador to the United States looks set to call on the help of Reform UK leader Nigel Farage to help him to win over Donald Trump's administration. But after Lord Mandelson said this in 2019, is there any hope of a UK and USA special relationship? But is he the wrong man at the wrong time? Well, we can now speak with the senior fellow at the Bow Group, Lee Cohen. Lee, welcome to the show. You wrote an excellent op-ed in The Spectator, quite simply saying that you believe Peter Mandelson is the wrong man at the wrong time. Before we get on to if Nigel Farage could be the right man at the right time to help, tell us why you think Mandy is a flawed prospect.
Well, good afternoon, Martin, and thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure, as always, to speak to you. Peter Mandelson is an extraordinary choice for UK ambassador to the United States and has certainly raised eyebrows and has raised temperatures, it seems, according to some commentary by President Trump's campaign manager, who made some very sharp remarks about Peter Mandelson. And while
he called him an absolute moron and sad, and he should stay at home, let's be blunt.
He did, and thank you for pointing that out. While Lord Mandelson brings significant experience and political skill, his ideological differences with Trump, his past criticisms of the president-elect, and his history of controversy present significant challenges to building a strong and effective relationship between the UK and the US during a Trump administration. Mr. Mandelson is emblematic of an elitist Blairite mindset that is antithetical to Trump and his circle's way of thinking. It is difficult, really difficult, Martin, to imagine that he will have any cachet or gain much purchase in Trump World 2.0. And Lord Mandelson will need to recruit all of his skills that he has honed as the so-called Prince of Darkness to really navigate in Washington. But honestly, what right-thinking U.S. presidential administration would want to engage closely with the Prince of Darkness?
Well, why don't we now take a look, actually, at that clip I mentioned a minute ago, at some previous comments that Peter Mandelson made in 2019 that, how should we put it, they come back to haunt him.
With an American president who is little short of a white nationalist and racist. Even those who have a sneaking admiration for Donald Trump because of the strength of his personality, nonetheless regard him as reckless and a danger to the world.
Lee Cohen, it seems that every single person in the top flight to the Labour Party at some point in the past has called Donald Trump a fascist, a white supremacist, a racist, compared him to Adolf Hitler. It seems to be almost a part of the job description. Back to my earlier point, is there then a place for somebody like Nigel Farage to be that bridge between Mandelson and Trump? And could that be a danger for Nigel Farage? On the one hand, it will place him as a senior playmaker, a deal maker to help with the special relationship. But do you think that he might be being utilised in a sense to help cleanse the reputation of the Labour Party, who have, let's face it, a lot of gremlins in their closets?
Well, I think there is some danger, but I have full faith in Nigel Farage that he knows what he's doing, and he really knows. He really has an outstanding relationship with President Trump, and I say thank heaven for that, because that could be the only thing to keep the special relationship from going off the rails, with two antithetical approaches, two antithetical worldviews. Trump is much less interested in global world order. He's much more interested in an entrepreneurial way of getting things done effectively. And Nigel understands this, and so do the others that are close to the president, certainly notably like Elon Musk. And it really is difficult to imagine that there's going to be much that they have to say to each other. This Starmer's choice in Lord Mandelson, who has been so pro-EU, and Starmer has made statements to the effect that he doesn't have to choose one way or another. But as we know, Trump is a world leader that demands loyalty, so he's going to want to know that the UK is certainly behind the US in its trade, in defense and intelligence and all of those things. And he's not going to want any half measures. And, with Lord Mandelson's past, certainly he's been an effective, he's been effective for the European Union. But we're talking about the UK's interests and the USA's interests and the interests of the shared relationship. And I think that's what's at stake. And thank heaven there's someone like Nigel Farage in the background to sort of keep things moving in the right direction.
And Lee, it has to be said that Lord Peter Mandelson was one of the most frothing at the mouth Remainers in Christendom. He was absolutely wedded to the idea of Brussels being the epicentre of power across continental Europe. And of course, Donald Trump has a diametrically opposed position to that. He sees the European Union as almost like a mafia-style racket. That's his description for it. He'd like to break up their power base. Is it possible for somebody like Peter Mandelson to keep Brussels happy and keep Donald Trump happy?
Well, I think that's a very difficult needle to thread. But certainly by reputation, Mandelson is a very skilled operator. So on the one hand, perhaps he was the best of Starmer's choices, of the people in the Starmer camp, to assume this post. But from an ideological standpoint and from the standpoint of, having been made indiscreet remarks about a president who really demands loyalty and really prizes loyalty, it's difficult to imagine he's going to be able to be part of conversations that really matter in Washington.
Totally get it. And also it's worth pointing out there are people within the Labour Party themselves not at all happy. Top of that list is Lord David Blunkett, of course, was with the Tony Blair government. He's saying that getting Nigel Farage on board gives him a position of authority, which he doesn't warrant. I suspect this story will rumble on and on. But thanks for joining us from Florida. And that's the Senior Fellow at the Bow Group, Lee Cohen. Always a pleasure. Thank you, and a very Merry Christmas to you, sir. Thank you. Now, maybe less than 48 hours to go until the big day, but Christmas is not filled with joy for everybody. For some of our veterans, our armed forces veterans, they might find themselves alone this week. But thanks to one charity in Greater Manchester, many veterans will receive the support that they deserve this year. Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper paid a visit.
The most wonderful time of the year. For many, Christmas is filled with festive joy. But for some of our veterans, December can be a lonely and difficult month.
Christmas comes straight after Remembrance, and normally you used to get a dip in people's mental health after Remembrance, and it wiped them for Christmas. It's no secret that many veterans or many people serving come from council estates and broken families and stuff like that, so we get a lot of people that can't afford Christmas, struggle really bad with Christmas.
After being wounded in Afghanistan, Craig left the army. But when he returned home, he found the adjustment to civilian life difficult. So in 2018, he launched the Spearhead Foundation to support veterans like himself. Now they've helped over 4,000 ex-service men and women, in particular over the festive period.
We run a programme leading up to Christmas, which is getting donations of presents in, and then the veterans will then get allocated a list of addresses as volunteers, and then they'll go out and deliver these presents to those people. But we basically try and bring that Christmas spirit in and try and get everyone involved in it. Last year we gave 214 present sacks out to families across Greater Manchester and the North West who had all struggled with Christmas.
Just one of the veterans helped by the foundation is Adam. When he first joined, he was struggling to the point where he was on the verge of taking his own life.
With the foundation, they've done a lot to help me on no longer having them suicidal thoughts. To help me a lot therapeutically to get rid of the bad thoughts in my head. The reason I'm still here is due to the foundation. They've done everything to help me stay in a positive way to keep myself alive.
Now Adam is in a much better place. He volunteers as the head chef at the foundation and has befriended another veteran. Together they keep active and share memories from their days in the forces.
One morning I was marking and a jet fired a rocket while I was in front of the target and it missed me. I felt the draft, so I nearly wasn't here.
Aged 93, Fred lives alone, but because of the Spearhead Foundation, he gets to be around other people like him on a daily basis.
I've always been quiet. The RAF brought me out quite a bit. But when you come back, sometimes you slip back to your ways. But now they've made me more easy, relaxed with strange people.
This time of year can often be a struggle for our veterans, but with the help of charities like the Spearhead Foundation, they too can experience the joy of Christmas. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
It's wonderful package and great reporting. Can I just say a very Merry Christmas and a well done to all of our magnificent reporters this year, called Sophie Reaper, Jack Carson, Will Hollis, Tony Maguire, Anna Riley and Doogie Beattie out there in the provinces, making Britain's news channel about the provinces, talking to you, getting great stories across. They've all done such an amazing job this year. Merry Christmas to all of our reporters. Now it's time now for our biggest and greatest Great British giveaway this year, and your chance to win 50 grand in tax-free moolah. It's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away, and it could be yours in time for Christmas. Here's all the details that you need to win that whopping, mouth-watering 50 grand cash. And next, we'll be cutting live to Germany. I think we've got some live pictures for you now. As you can see on your screen, a significant crowd gathering in Magdeburg after that terror attack, of course, by Taleb al-Abdel Mohsen, which left 5 dead, including a 9-year-old boy, and 205 injured, as Germany is on the precipice. I'll be joined by the former AfD MEP, Dr. Gunnar Beck, to get his thoughts on the tragic incident in Germany that's appalled the entire world and making Germany ask huge questions about its political future. And as you can see, significant crowds are gathering in their numbers. That's next with me. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
My next guest knew George Carman rather intimately. Indeed, he immediately asked her for her hand in marriage when they first met. Karen Phillips knew Carman from 1986 and was a close friend until his death in 2001. Karen has used court transcripts and personal documents to construct her new book, Get Carman. There it is. And here you are. Karen, thank you very much indeed. So you knew him very well, and actually, he began to write a little bit of an autobiography just in the weeks before his death. And from those pages, I was struck by the amount of uncertainty that there was about the man. This man who was so confident in court, who charmed juries so famously, but in some ways felt that he was an actor, in some ways felt that he was fighting back nerves and uncertainties. Is that true?
I think he was quite worried about every case. It was much more that he was concerned for the client. He always wanted to do his best. He worked so hard to win a case, not really for his personal satisfaction, but because he didn't want to let people down.
His success rate was extraordinary, and, you know, I'll choose my words carefully here, but shall we say that many people were surprised at the time that Jeremy Thorpe was found not guilty. It was astonishing in the case of Jonathan Aitken, for example, that the principal charge against him, which was that he'd been corrupt in arms dealings, I don't think that was ever actually reached during the court. It seems even more surprising today that people who were employed by Mohammed Fayed were believed in the case of Neil Hamilton. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, his results are extraordinary.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 4:24 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, tributes have poured in following the German Christmas market attack, which left 5 dead, including a 9-year-old boy, and over 200 injured, with some remaining in a critical condition. I believe we have live pictures of you now from Magdeburg, where the AfD, the German political party, are about to hold a political rally. You can see those live pictures there. There are speeches and a significant crowd gathering. And I'm now joined by the former AfD MEP, Dr. Gunnar Beck. Herr Beck, welcome to the show. It's always a pleasure to have your company. Can I first start by asking you, you're in Dusseldorf now, you're in Germany. This is a truly tragic incident which has appalled the entire world. What's the mood amongst the German people? And do you believe that this could be a significant turning point in Germany's political landscape?
Well, there have been many points which could have been significant and so far hasn't resulted. in any significant change. I think erosion, gradual erosion of public perceptions is probably the right word. What's the mood? Obviously, people are appalled by what happened, and there appears to be widespread disinformation. Not so much by the AfD, though. There's much talk of this being an isolated incident, insignificant in terms of wider social trends, and not really suitable for identifying any causes. But of course, the truth of the matter is that before 2015, such incidents just didn't occur in Germany. Now they recur almost annually.
And Herr Beck, there's been a huge amount of conversation around this individual, Taleb al-Abdel Mohsen, and the fact there were many warnings, repeated warnings over years that this guy was a latent and present danger and threat. And not only was he not deported to Saudi Arabia, but human rights lawyers stepped in and protected him. Whose side are these people on?
Well, you're absolutely right. He's issued threats of mass of such an incident at least since 2010. Not too long ago, I think a year ago, the Saudis warned the German government that this man was a danger. He was convicted of threatening violence in 2013, and yet he was granted permanent asylum in 2016. So repeatedly, on more than 3 occasions, the German government ignored warnings about his intentions. Well, human rights lawyers are in a sense doing their job. They're making a living by taking advantage of the law. But the truth is, of course, there's been political pressure, and ultimately the judges cannot be exculpated here. There's always an element of discretion in judicial decisions. So I think there's been a widespread turning both eyes to the patently obvious. Not only by human rights lawyers.
And Dr. Beck, what's the mood now for change? We've seen ordinary people taking to the streets of Magdeburg and elsewhere saying enough is enough. Of course, the media are smearing them as far right. They're smearing them as neo-Nazis. But give us a picture of the types of people who are saying enough is enough. This isn't some proto-Nazi uprising in Germany.
It is.
OK, tell us more.
Well, I think in Germany, pretty much any criticism of the government, and when I say government, I don't just mean the current government, because all the traditional parties essentially advocate the same policies. Any criticism of their open-door migration policy, of the current LBGT ideology, and of the climate change agenda, any criticism is denounced as far right. A person, and in fact, practically all these people who are demonstrating now have entirely unblemished records. Nonetheless, they are far right, and the only indicators for this denunciation is the fact that they are criticizing the current government agenda. That's all. There are no true indicators of far-right sympathies.
And may I ask you, Dr. Beck, Elon Musk has got involved now, saying that only the AfD can save Germany. AfD is the only hope. The traditional political parties in Germany have utterly failed the people. A, do the people agree? Can we see parties like the AfD making big gains in the elections in February? And do you think that the millions of dollars that Elon Musk could pump into Germany would be a welcome contribution to try and upset the political establishment?
It's difficult to say. I mean, the truth is, none of the other parties can save Germany. Whether the AfD can remains to be seen. I think there are 2 main obstacles. One is, and you've alluded to it, the party is currently polling at about 20%. That's obviously not enough, because all the other parties have made clear they would never enter into a governing coalition agreement with the AfD. But the country is also divided. There's the eastern part, where the AfD has successfully established itself as the largest political force. In Thuringia, it recently scored over a third of the popular vote in regional elections, more than 10 percentage points ahead of everyone else. So certainly in part of the country, it is making a difference. But it is fair to say that in Western Germany, people are still far more reluctant to voice their discontent. So the country is divided. I think that's the best assessment, which I, as a fairly neutral observer, now that I'm no longer actively involved in politics, can give you.
And we can see now pictures on our screen there, Dr. Beck, from Magdeburg. The square there, the market square, seems to be very, very busy, full of people who have turned out to voice their concerns, to add their support. Do you think this, I mean, I mentioned it at the start of this interview, but how many more tragedies, how many more terror attacks will it take before there is this political awakening? Surely Germany has to say at some point, enough is enough. This must stop.
Well, you see, I'll give you an example. What you've just said, political awakening. There is a phrase, a very similar phrase, that was used by the Nazis in the 1930s. If you currently found yourself in Germany, and if you voiced that phrase in Germany, you might find yourself subject to political persecution. And you would be convicted by a court. That's the level of public prosecution and persecution of government critics in Germany. And that explains why it is still far more difficult in Germany to voice criticism of policies that have catastrophically failed. The open door migration policy has catastrophically failed, both in terms of internal security as well as the government's finances. Its financial consequences are even more dramatic. The government's energy policy is a shambles, and the same is true of anything else the German government has done. But because in the 12 years where the Nazis ruled Germany, they inevitably used some of the vocabulary that is part of the German language and was used before and afterwards. Nonetheless, the fact that it's been used by the Nazis is sufficient reason for judicial prosecution.
Okay.
That explains why, at least in West Germany, most people are still intimidated. What I can say with a fair degree of confidence, but also resignation, is Germany will be the last country in Europe to change, I'm sad to say.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you for your expertise. As ever, there's a former AfD MEP, Dr. Gunnar Beck. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. There's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Your headlines at 4:34. The UK economy flatlined in the third quarter of the year, with revised figures showing no growth in GDP between July and September. The Office for National Statistics partly blamed weaker trading in bars and restaurants, while businesses warned the country is headed for the worst of all worlds amid fears of reduced output and hiring. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the economic challenges are huge, but vows her budget will deliver long-term growth. Meanwhile, Shadow Culture Secretary Stuart Andrew is pointing the finger at the Labour government, warning that a recession is increasingly likely if their policies continue.
This is a really worrying time. They talk down the economy, so it's no wonder that confidence is falling. But then they made some disastrous decisions in the budget, not least the national insurance contributions hike, which is having a real impact on confidence for businesses and what they were thinking about for their future and any investments that they were thinking for growth. And then, you know, I obviously work very closely with charities, for example, and they are facing a significant hike in their national insurance contributions bill, totaling about £1.4 billion.
To the US now, where the suspect accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has pleaded not guilty. Luigi Mangione is facing 11 charges, including first-degree murder and terrorism. If convicted, the 26-year-old could face life in prison without parole. In addition to the state's case, a federal case against Mangione is running concurrently. One of the charges, murder through use of a firearm, would make him eligible for the death penalty if he's convicted. However, his defence attorneys called the situation highly unusual, noting conflicting theories between the state and federal cases. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer is heading abroad again over the new year after drawing criticism about his frequent overseas trips to various summits. The Prime Minister is enjoying his first Christmas in the role, and according to Number 10, he will spend time with his family over the coming days. However, instead of doing so at Downing Street or their family home, the Starmers will head to the Grace and Favour country residence of Chequers in Buckinghamshire. After spending Christmas Day there, the Prime Minister and his family are going to head overseas. And King Charles will deliver this year's Christmas message from the Fitzrovia Chapel, a former hospital chapel in central London. It's the first time in over a decade the speech isn't recorded at a royal residence, with the King choosing the location to highlight healthcare workers and foster unity between faiths. The ornate 19th century chapel was once part of the Middlesex Hospital and now hosts exhibitions and community events. This year's message comes as the King continues treatment following a cancer diagnosis earlier in 2023. The speech will air on Christmas Day at 3 p.m. across TV and radio. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud has arrived and will continue to spread across the rest of the UK during the rest of today, bringing drizzle and hill fog, but also bringing much milder weather in time for Christmas. This warm front is the culprit. That's what's bringing the thick and low cloud to much of the UK through the rest of the day, along with outbreaks of mostly light and patchy rain and drizzle, some heavier bursts particularly running along northern Scotland. And by the end of the night, we're all in this gloomy but mild airflow from the Atlantic. So grey skies, hill fog, patchy drizzle first thing, but temperatures of 8 to 12 Celsius. So unusually mild as we begin Christmas Eve compared with the time of year and compared with Christmas Eves gone by. A lot of that cloud will stick around as well throughout the morning. A few breaks in the clouds, some brighter interludes there to the east of higher ground, so parts of the Midlands and perhaps eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, seeing some brighter skies, but western Scotland certainly seeing a lot of thick cloud and outbreaks of persistent, at times moderate or heavy outbreaks of rain and drizzle. The drizzle though and the more persistent wet weather mostly confined to western Scotland by the afternoon. There will be a few spots over the Pennines, parts of Northern Ireland as well, but the further south and east you are, the drier it will be. There'll be some brightness coming through, and with this mild wind direction, temperatures widely of 12 or 13 Celsius, could even see 14 or 15 degrees in one or two spots. So after that mild afternoon, we go into a very mild Christmas night. A lot of cloud cover, that cloud low covering the hills of the north and the west, and it's going to bring further drizzle, particularly for western Scotland, with a strengthening wind by the start of Christmas Day. But Christmas Day itself, very mild, mostly dry.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Good afternoon. There's queues in Cumbria on the northbound M6 from Catalan up to Carlisle South Junction 41 to 42, still queuing. An earlier collision then, a fallen tree still adding to delays. Issues continue in Shropshire. The westbound M54 remains closed between junctions 4 and 5, so Shifnal through towards Telford Central. That's queuing, again due to a collision. The earlier bump on the southbound M5's clear down to Worcester at 6, still very slow though in both directions. Now the M1 M1 northbound lane closed on the exit slip coming off at Nottingham and Derby at 25. There's a breakdown there. Also, the M1 into the roadworks northbound around Luton Airport at 10, queuing for about half an hour, as is the anti-clockwise side of the M25 heading towards the Dartford tunnels. And for now, that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, car manufacturers Honda and Nissan have announced plans to merge as the Japanese car giants struggle to match rivals producing electric vehicles. And the merger would make it the third biggest car maker in the world and see the company valued at some $50 billion. But why are they falling so far behind in the electric vehicle market? And actually, is it because nobody really wants an electric car? And I'm joined now by the motoring journalist and the great friend of the show. A very, very Merry Christmas to Captain Danny Kelly. Danny, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. When I saw this story this morning, I thought, why are some of the biggest car makers in the world having to pool resources? The answer is clear. They need to try and get together to cut their costs because they're being forced, are they not, tell me I'm wrong, to sell cars that nobody really wants.
Well, that's it in a nutshell, Martin. In fact, there are punitive sales figures that people have got to reach. And, for example, all UK manufacturers, and this is Europe-wide, but all UK manufacturers, if 22% of their cars are not pure electric, so not hybrid, but pure electric, for every car that they sell over that target, they actually miss that target. They're charged £15,000 a car. So if they miss that target by 100 cars, that's £150,000. The maths is so punishing, Martin. And Nissan and Honda are, if you like, lagging behind other car manufacturers with pure electric. They're great at hybrids, but they're lagging behind with pure electric. It's the footballing equivalent, just to give you an analogy, of West Ham and Fulham pooling their first team squads to take on the new threat of Chelsea Football Club. It's as significant as that. Car mergers aren't new. They're incredibly uncommon. But for Honda and Nissan to pool their resources with Mitsubishi as well, then it just goes to show, the gravity of the situation. The rise of the Chinese electric power, which is what they're calling it, is just a worldwide threat. And unless they pool resources, they're going to just potentially go out of business. And what's so important, Martin, we mustn't forget that 7,000 people are employed by Nissan in Sunderland, 30,000 in the supply chain. So 37,000 Brits rely on Nissan's success. And it's incredibly concerning times.
And Danny, maybe your team, Everton, could be saved by a merger with my team, Nottingham Forest, but I'm not feeling that generous at Christmas. I digress. on a more serious point, isn't this that they're making them join resources together so they have more components that are shared to cut costs? So they're going to be sharing items to cook. But what that means is we'll get identikit cars that basically look the same, that offer the same performance, will have less choice. And I put it to you again, we're being forced and trammelled down a road of buying electric cars nobody really wants. The guy that drives me to work, he's going to Nottingham for Christmas. He's not taking his electric car. He's got no faith in it making it there. He's got no faith in it being able to be plugged in on the motorway in case there are 7 or 8 people waiting for chargers that oftentimes are broken. I'd put it to you again, Danny. All of this is a self-inflicted act of harry-carry on an industry. We don't want electric cars. If we did, we'd be buying them.
That's correct. You're so right. Generally speaking, I'm a used car dealer, Martin. I won't touch second-hand electric or indeed hybrid cars because generally speaking, people just don't want them unless you live in a house with a drive with a guaranteed overnight electric charge. A pal of mine, Martin, who lives in the Midlands, went to Colchester to pick up an electric Fiat 500. I shouldn't laugh. It took him 5.5 hours to get back home. He had to charge it 3 times. One of the locations the charger wasn't working. 5.5 hours to do what should have been a 2-hour journey in a fully electric Fiat 500. Generally speaking, people don't want them. I know sales managers from car dealerships like Kia, for example, in the Midlands. They've got these targets. Kia are really innovative. They're doing well with electric cars. But generally speaking, people just don't want the damn things. I am speaking broadly, I'm speaking generally. But honestly, we're being forced into it, we're being backed into a corner. And potentially, Martin, 37,000 jobs could be at risk in the northeast with the supply chain, and the 7,000 who work at Nissan's factory in Sunderland. It's a Europe-wide pressure, it's a Europe-wide target, and I just hope that Keir Starmer's government row back a little on these punitive sales figures. 22% this year, next year's 28% of all cars must be electric, otherwise each one you're over £15,000 fine per bonnet.
Okay, Danny Kelly, thank you very much for joining us. And I've got to say, a beautiful festive setup behind you. You've got enough Christmas tree lights there to light up Wembley Stadium, or perhaps even power your mates Nissan. Thank you very much, Danny Kelly, for all you've done this year on the channel. Excellent as ever. Danny Kelly, motoring journalist, great friend of the show, top lad. Now, if you're in search of some winter sun this year, who can blame you? Here's a forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations this year.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across southern parts of Europe over the next few days. Mostly fine in the west, more unsettled further east. Could see a few showers on Christmas Eve across the Canaries, but for much of Iberia, it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around here. And then we run into more unsettled conditions across southeastern parts of Europe. Some wind, some rain, even some hill snow in places. And that east-west split continues as we go through the Christmas period. Further unsettled weather to come in the east, generally fine the further west you are.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Now stick with us, because coming up we'll hear from South Derbyshire's Vocal Zone Voice Studio with their rendition of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. It's beautiful. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Robert Walton has been jet-setting in recent weeks in Singapore for the YYY Awards, and then back to London to host the inaugural Restaurant Association Awards.
Yep, and after many years in the industry, Robert also knows a thing or two about how to create the perfect Christmas, and it's all in the preparation. So we're going to be asking him about that as well. I'm delighted to say that the godfather of hospitality, Robert Walton, MBE, joins us now on the sofa.
Morning, Robert.
Robert,
Good
so
morning.
good to see you, and what a busy few weeks you have had. Yeah. Should we start with the YYY Awards? Because I think it's just wonderful who you celebrated at those awards.
So, the YYY, Young Chef, Young Waiter, Young Mixologist. And it's a competition that's created around the world. So people from all around the world can apply. So this year we had 9 countries, from India to the Caribbean, from the USA to Scotland and England. And so we had 27 young professionals. The average age was about 24.
Wow.
All coming to Singapore. So we flew everyone to Singapore. We create what I call the Olympic Village. We create a little village for them, and it's in a very cool spot with great bars. And then we have the competition. And this year, I can now announce, I was here just a few weeks ago before we had the competition, that the USA won, which was absolutely incredible. Thailand was second. And gorgeous Wales was third.
Yes. Well done, Wales.
Well done, Wales.
We now expect to have a good meal. There's no reason why you shouldn't have good food. The key now is the service, because there's no reason why you don't have good service. And good service is not that difficult. Smile, to start with. It really isn't that difficult. It's called hospitable. We call the industry, or the sector we look after is the hospitality industry, which is all about being hospitable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5 with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, we've got a beautiful thing for you here. It's the South Derbyshire Vocal Zone Voice Studio with their rendition of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Isn't that just magnificent? Absolutely love it. And also have a very, very Merry Christmas to my beautiful sister, Cheryl, who's watching live from Katy in Texas with her husband-to-be, Lewis. They're getting married in April. I can't wait to see you guys. Shame I can't see you at Christmas, but look, sending absolute love. And everyone else out there who enjoyed that, getting very tearful. All the boys in the gallery expect me to be crying at that. Stick with us. We'll be live from Germany for that AFD rally with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. There's your weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud has arrived and will continue to spread across the rest of the UK during the rest of today, bringing drizzle and hill fog, but also bringing much milder weather in time for Christmas. This warm front is the culprit. That's what's bringing the thick and low cloud to much of the UK through the rest of the day, along with outbreaks of mostly light and patchy rain and drizzle, some heavier bursts particularly running along northern Scotland. And by the end of the night, we're all in this gloomy but mild airflow from the Atlantic. So grey skies, hill fog, patchy drizzle first thing, but temperatures of 8 to 12 Celsius. So unusually mild as we begin Christmas Eve compared with the time of year and compared with Christmas Eves gone by. A lot of that cloud will stick around as well throughout the morning. A few breaks in the clouds, some brighter interludes there to the east of higher ground, so parts of the Midlands and perhaps eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, seeing some brighter skies, but western Scotland certainly seeing a lot of thick cloud and outbreaks of persistent, at times moderate or heavy outbreaks of rain and drizzle. The drizzle, though, and the more persistent wet weather mostly confined to western Scotland by the afternoon. There will be a few spots over the Pennines, parts of Northern Ireland as well, but the further south and east you are, the drier it will be. There'll be some brightness coming through, and with this mild wind direction, temperatures widely of 12 or 13 Celsius, could even see 14 or 15 degrees in one or two spots. So after that mild afternoon, we go into a very mild Christmas night. A lot of cloud cover, that cloud low covering the hills of the north and the west, and it's going to bring further drizzle, particularly for western Scotland, with a strengthening wind by the start of Christmas Day. But Christmas Day itself, very mild, mostly dry.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, heading west on the M8 away from Edinburgh, slow going, just around the M9 turn off junction 2. A collision there means very slow and at least partially blocked. The westbound M54 in Shropshire, with us back on the move now, all lanes open from Shifnal to Telford Central. Junction 4 to 5, that follows an earlier collision. Stop-start southbound M5 from the M42 to Droitwich, 4A down towards 5. There was a collision before junction 6. Delays are easing, though still quite slow. Towards Newport, South Wales, westbound M4Q to the Bringlass Tunnels. Eastbound M4 in Wiltshire, Swindon East to Hungerford, 15 to 14, a lane shut for emergency repairs. And a half-hour queue for the M1 into the roadworks northbound around Leekton Airport at junction 10 this afternoon. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting the call.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
A very good afternoon to you and a Merry Christmas on this beautiful Christmas Monday. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, after a terrorist attack on a Magdeburg Christmas market left 9 dead and 205 injured today, as you can see, a right-wing rally by the AfD party is being held in Magdeburg, the scene of that crime. And to add further twists, will Elon Musk donate millions of dollars to the AfD? They're the party leaders gathered to help save Germany. And Nigel Farage has agreed to help US Ambassador Peter Mandelson to win over Donald Trump. Is this best for Britain? Does it cement Nigel Farage's reputation as a political player, or by helping the under-fire Labour government? Is Nigel Farage helping his enemy? And Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's confronted by an angry constituent whilst handing out mince pies in West Yorkshire. Take a butcher's.
It's so two-faced. Give him a mince pie out.
Yeah. It's a nice tradition.
No. Give him a blanket because they're freezing to death. It's freezing about.
Oh, but they can't even give away a mince pie. And Reform UK's new treasurer, billionaire Nick Candy, well, he says that Elon Musk is just one of a number of billionaires willing to donate to the insurgent party. Candy's claiming that British politics will undergo disruption like we have never seen before. Could 2025 be the year of the Reform Revolution? And that's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Now, we learned earlier in the show that the guy they call Jet Set Starmer, or Never Hear Keir, is going on another foreign trip. 75,000 miles and 15 countries and rising is not enough, as the Prime Minister takes time to go to another foreign country for a break over the new year to pay tribute to the guy with more air miles than Sir Richard Branson. Here's a little ditty we put together here at GB News. Ooh, I could watch that all day. I absolutely love that. Sorry to keep playing it, but it just makes me laugh. And thank you for the boys for putting that together in the gallery. Everybody deserves a holiday, let's be honest, including the Prime Minister, but it has to be said, he does spend a lot of time abroad. Now, get in touch all the usual ways. Get in touch, gbnews.com/yoursay. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's just gone 5 o'clock. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. The UK economy flatlined in the third quarter of the year, with revised figures showing no growth in GDP between July and September. The Office for National Statistics partly blamed weaker trading in bars and restaurants, while businesses warned the country is headed for the worst of all worlds amid fears of reduced output and hiring. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says that the economic challenges are huge, but vows her budget will deliver long-term growth. Meanwhile, Shadow Culture Secretary Stuart Andrew is pointing the finger at the Labour government, warning that a recession is increasingly likely if their policies continue.
This is a really worrying time. They talked down the economy, so it's no wonder that confidence is falling, but then they made some disastrous decisions in the budget, not least the national insurance contributions hike, which is having a real impact on confidence for businesses and what they were thinking about for their future and any investments that they were thinking for growth. And then, you know, I obviously work very closely with charities, for example, and they are facing a significant hike in their national insurance contributions bill, totalling about £1.4 billion.
To the US now, where the suspect accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has pleaded not guilty. Luigi Mangione is facing 11 charges, including first-degree murder and terrorism. If convicted, the 26-year-old could face life in prison without parole. In addition to the state's case, a federal case against Mangione is running concurrently. One of the charges, murder through use of a firearm, would make him eligible for the death penalty if he's convicted. However, his defence attorneys called the situation highly unusual, noting conflicting theories between the state and federal cases. Sir Keir Starmer is heading abroad again over the new year after drawing criticism about his frequent overseas trips to various summits. The Prime Minister is enjoying his first Christmas in the role, and according to Number 10, he'll be spending time with his family over the coming days. However, instead of doing so at Downing Street or their family home, the Starmers will head to the Grace and Favour country residence of Chequers in Buckinghamshire. After spending Christmas Day there, the Prime Minister and his family are going to head overseas. And King Charles will deliver this year's Christmas message from the Fitzrovia Chapel, a former hospital chapel in central London. It's the first time in over a decade the speech isn't recorded at a royal residence, with the King choosing the location to highlight healthcare workers and foster unity between faiths. The ornate 19th century chapel was once part of the Middlesex Hospital and now hosts exhibitions and community events. This year's message comes as the King continues treatment following a cancer diagnosis earlier in 2023. The speech will air on Christmas Day at 3 p.m. across TV and radio. And Morrison's has cut the price of items, including turkeys and champagne, for all shoppers after a system glitch caused chaos and loyalty discounts failing and Christmas deliveries cancelled. Customers reported their more card savings didn't apply at the tills, and some deliveries or click and collect orders were running late on one of the busiest shopping days of the year. The supermarket's website also experienced outages. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, Britain's new ambassador to the US looks set to call on the help of Reform UK leader Nigel Farage to help him to win over Donald Trump's administration. But after Lord Mandelson said this in 2019, is there any hope of a special relationship between the UK and the USA?
With an American president who is little short of a white nationalist and racist. Even those who have a sneaking admiration for Donald Trump because of the strength of his personality, nonetheless regard him as reckless and a danger to the world.
It seems like everybody, the top brass of the Labour Party, has had some kind of pop at Donald Trump. But let's now speak with the political strategist, John Oxley. John, welcome to the show. So they call Peter Mandelson the Prince of Darkness. The question is, will these comments come back to haunt him?
Well, I think the one thing we've seen about Peter Mandelson over sort of his 40 years in politics is he seems to be able to charm almost anyone. You know, he was one of the very first spin doctors and has a real reputation for being able to get people on side. So, I think when you talk to people in and around Westminster, they have some confidence that no matter what he's said before, if anyone can turn it around, it's probably Peter Mandelson.
John Oxley, an unlikely political marriage would be that between Peter Mandelson and Nigel Farage. The arch frothing at the mouth Remainer, Mandelson, the king of Brexit, Nigel Farage, and yet Peter Mandelson said back in November, I would include Nigel Farage in my team. You can't ignore him. He's an elected MP. Do you think that this will precipitate itself to be that unlikely marriage where we could have them working in tandem to do what's best for Britain?
I think there will be certainly some overtures made, and I think Nigel Farage would always want to do his best to try and get Britain the best representation it can do in the United States and really bolster his own personal brand by having that role as matchmaker. And, I think, again, if you look through Peter Mandelson's career, he's always been a great political player. He's always been able to get people on side, even within the Labour Party, sort of people on the left who you might not necessarily think could work with him. He's always managed by hook or by crook to get the best out of them. So I think if he's committed to making that relationship work, then it could probably be a productive one for him, for Nigel Farage and for the country.
And John Oxley, perhaps Mr. Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, needs a bit of oil on the squeaking wheel, so to speak. Chris Lacaviata, a GOP strategist who helped to get Donald Trump elected, said at the weekend he called Mandelson an absolute moron who should stay at home. He called him sad, and again referring to those comments where he referred to Donald Trump as little short of a white nationalist. Is there a danger, though, John Oxley, that in using Nigel Farage to bridge that gap, as it were, that Nigel Farage could be helping his political adversaries? Why would Nigel Farage want to help the Labour Party to have a successful relationship with the USA? Or is it a case of putting the country first and your own political beliefs into second place?
I think that's right. I think, when we look at our relationship with the United States, it's a hugely important relationship in terms of diplomacy, in terms of security, in terms of trade. And, obviously, if that goes well, the Labour Party will pay some dividends from that, but it is for the good of the country that we have the best relationship possible with the United States, regardless of what their politics are, and regardless of what your personal ambitions are in British politics. And I think it'd be wise of Nigel Farage to embrace it. But in the end, if he looks like he's facilitating that relationship and it's going well, then I think that becomes something he can lean on. He can show that he made this work. He can show that he can act cooperatively when he needs to. And if we get towards the next election and it's looking like Reform might be going into coalition with someone, he can sort of pull that out of his pocket and say, look, you all said I was a bit of a monster, but when it comes to it, I can work productively with whoever and I can make it work. So it could be a double-edged sword, but I think if there's one thing we know about Nigel Farage, he knows how to put a spin on things and get the best image possible out of them.
John Oxley, we know that Keir Starmer campaigned to reverse Brexit for years. Now, the Labour Party has said they won't do that in power. Peter Mandelson was the lead trumpet in the orchestra about the overtures towards Brussels, and yet Donald Trump has a very, very different take on that. He sees the European Union as a cartel, and he doesn't want to deal with a collective. He wants to deal with individual nation states. Can Peter Mandelson do what's right for Britain while putting what's right for Brussels in second place?
I think that's quite likely. I think, with someone like this, it's a very one-on-one role being the ambassador. You're not going to be involved in much of the dealings with Brussels. And I think, again, if he's loyal to anyone beyond himself, he's loyal to the Labour Party. And Peter Mandelson will be wanting to do the best for Keir Starmer. And that will mean doing the best for Britain when it comes to those sort of trade negotiations or those other negotiations with the United States. So I think, if we look at Peter Mandelson's career, he can rein in his own opinions when he wants to. And I think, going to being an ambassador, you're sort of acknowledging that you're going to do that, and you're going to focus on the brief you have, which is the relationship between Britain and the United States.
OK, thank you very much for your expertise. Always a pleasure. That's the political strategist, yes, John Oxley, on the dark arts of the Prince of Darkness, Peter Mandelson. Thank you very much indeed. Now, it may be less now than 48 hours to go. Can you believe it? Until the big day. But Christmas is not filled with joy for everybody. And for some of our veterans, they might find themselves alone this week. But thanks to one charity in Greater Manchester, many veterans will receive the support that they deserve this year. And our North West reporter, Sophie Reaper, paid a visit.
The most wonderful time of the year. For many, Christmas is filled with festive joy. But for some of our veterans, December can be a lonely and difficult month.
Christmas comes straight after Remembrance, and normally you used to get a dip in people's mental health after Remembrance, and it wiped them for Christmas. It's no secret that many veterans or many people serving come from council estates, and broken families and stuff like that. So we get a lot of people that can't afford Christmas, struggle really bad with Christmas.
After being wounded in Afghanistan, Craig left the army. But when he returned home, he found the adjustment to civilian life difficult. So in 2018, he launched the Spearhead Foundation to support veterans like himself. Now they've helped over 4,000 ex-service men and women, in particular over the festive period.
We run a programme leading up to Christmas, which is getting donations of presents in, and then the veterans will then get allocated a list of addresses as volunteers, and then they'll go out and deliver these presents to those people. But we basically try and bring that Christmas spirit in and try and get everyone involved in it. Last year we gave 214 present sacks out to families across Greater Manchester and the North West who had all struggled with Christmas.
Just one of the veterans helped by the foundation is Adam. When he first joined, he was struggling to the point where he was on the verge of taking his own life.
With the foundation, they've done a lot to help me on no longer having them suicidal thoughts. To help me a lot therapeutically to get rid of the bad thoughts in my head. The reason I'm still here is due to the foundation. They've done everything to help me stay in a positive way to keep myself alive.
Now Adam is in a much better place. He volunteers as the head chef at the foundation and has befriended another veteran. Together they keep active and share memories from their days in the forces.
One morning I was marking and a jet fired a rocket while I was in front of the target and it missed me. I felt the draft, so I nearly wasn't here.
Aged 93, Fred lives alone, but because of the Spearhead Foundation, he gets to be around other people like him on a daily basis.
I've always been quiet. The RAF brought me out quite a bit. But when you come back, sometimes you slip back to your ways. But now they've made me more easy, relaxed, with strange people.
This time of year can often be a struggle for our veterans, but with the help of charities like the Spearhead Foundation, they too can experience the joy of Christmas. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
That's a wonderful package. And the Spearhead Foundation, you can get involved and give donations if you'd like to at Christmas. Thanks to anybody and everybody who's served our country. Thank you for your service. It really, really means a lot, especially at Christmas. And can I also say a special thank you to GB News' national reporters this year. Sophie Reaper, Jack Carson, Will Hollis, Tony Maguire, Anna Riley, Doogie Beattie. I think he's done a tremendous job this year making sure the People's Channel gets out to the provinces and covers vital stories like that. It's just tremendous to support our armed service personnel, especially at this time of year. Many of them, of course, just miss the comradeship, the band of brothers. They miss their buddies. Christmas can be a challenging time. So the Spearhead Foundation, get involved, support their amazing work if you'd like to do that. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch throughout the show on Germany, on Keir Starmer being away, on Peter Mandelson. Let's get stuck into a few of those now. Barry says this, Sir Keir Starmer's travels. He does know that he's the Prime Minister for the UK, doesn't he? Or is he after Simon Calder's job? Yeah, nice one. Of course, Simon Calder is the legendary travel reporter. He's been on GB News many times over the year. Often pops up in an airport randomly around the world, a bit like the Prime Minister. And Paul says this, they had the guts to claim that Liz Truss damaged the economy. Well, look at the state of it now. Rachel Reeves is clearly taking that crown. Of course, this is off the back of the fact that the downturn in the economic fortunes of the country predicted by the Confederation of Business Industries today, looking at flatlining growth or perhaps even tumbling towards recession. They promise us stability, or actually are we facing towards anarchy? And on the subject of Germany, we had live pictures earlier on from that AfD rally, from the scene of that Christmas market in Germany, where 5 were killed, including a 9-year-old boy, 205 injured, some of them very, very seriously. We were talking about what next for Germany. A lot of people there rising up and saying enough is enough. And we had Dr. Gunnar Beck on. He's a former AfD MEP. And Lawrence says this, listening to Dr. Beck was really informative, a great guess, such a sad time in Germany. And I think we are heading towards elections in February. We could see a political uprising. And Elon Musk, first making overtures towards Reform UK, now saying only the AfD can save Germany. He was saying the mainstream political parties have betrayed Germany and it's time for change. And on the topic of electric vehicles, we covered a story today that Nissan and Honda are merging, making themselves the third biggest motor corporation on the planet. And that's because they can't sell enough electric vehicles. So they're being forced into a merger because they can't shift enough units of cars that people simply do not seem to want. And on that topic, Judy says this: why do car manufacturers not just refuse to make electric vehicles? Nobody seems to want them. Judy, the problem with that is that the manufacturers are being fined, I think, £16,000 for every unit that they fail to sell by meeting those targets. Going towards 2030, when the government wants to completely remove the sale of petrol and diesel vehicles. No one was ever asked about this. Nobody was ever consulted. And we're seeing motor industries throughout Europe and now Japan being decimated by what seems to be, to many, economic harry-carry. Now, moving on, and thanks for all of your comments. There's still time to get in touch before the end of the show. gbnews.com/you'll say is the way to do it. But now it's time for your biggest and greatest Great British giveaway this year, and your chance to win a whopping 50 grand in tax-free cash. It's the biggest cash prize we've ever given away here at GB News, and it could be yours in time for Christmas. And here's all the details that you need to win that whopping £50,000 cash.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be
Coming up, we'll get the latest from Germany, from Magdeburg, as the right-wing political party, the AfD, as you can see there, live pictures on your screen, a significant rally, a gathering at Magdeburg. These pictures are from slightly earlier on today. They're hosting a rally following the tragic incident that left 5 dead, including a 9-year-old boy, and 205 left injured. Many Germans crying, enough is enough. That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
In 2020, after almost 80 years, Oxford University's Pitt Rivers Museum removed its famous collection of shrunken heads with sewn-up lips and eyes made by the South American Shuar and Ashwar people. How do museums decide what should be shown and what should be confined to storage? Can controversial exhibits be left on display with suitable contextualisation in captions? Who would want to be a curator facing such controversial questions? For a view, I'm delighted to be joined by journalist Eitan Smallman. Welcome to GB News. I think many people, when they hear that we're going to discuss museums or art galleries, think that it's going to be, that wokery question. But it strikes me, and I think it strikes you too, that this is not just about wokery at all. There are some really interesting ethical questions here. For example, let's start with this one, and there are several examples of it. Should we be displaying human bodies, the remains of human beings? Should we be displaying them in museums?
Absolutely. It's not just the usual suspects, young snowflakes, who are objecting to these things. They're just naturally cultural shifts, and people of all ages and all political persuasions may feel uneasy about displaying human remains of any kind, especially human remains that have been taken against the will of the communities or taken violently. Hilary Mantel led a campaign to remove a 7-foot 7-inch skeleton of Charles Byrne, known as the Irish Giant, from the Hunterian Museum. He had specifically said that he didn't want to be displayed and didn't want to be taken by anatomists, and yet was displayed for a couple of hundred years until a couple of years ago. He hasn't had the burial he requested, but he's no longer on public display.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:25 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, tributes have poured in following the German Christmas market attack, which left 5 dead and over 200 injured, with some remaining in a critical condition. And earlier on, we saw a rally in Magdeburg. The AfD party turned up a significant crowd gathering in the market square. Now, we can now speak with the chief Germany correspondent at The Economist, Tom Nuttall. Tom, who joins us live, I believe, from Berlin. Tom, thanks for joining us here on GB News. The entire world joined in its condemnation and its revulsion of this terrible, terrible attack onto a group of innocent revellers at a Christmas market. And we see pictures here on our screen, Tom, of a significant gathering earlier on in the market square at Magdeburg led by the AfD political party. What next for Germany? Do you think we're going to see a significant change of politics, and does any of that concern you?
I'm actually sceptical that we'll see a major political change, because this was a very peculiar case. There had been concerns for weeks in Germany that we might see an attack on a Christmas market. As many of your viewers will know, there was an Islamist attack on a Christmas market in Berlin back in 2016, one of the worst terrorist attacks in German history, killed 13 people. This was terrible, of course, but the perpetrator appears to be a very different sort of figure. He's from Saudi Arabia. He arrived in Germany back in 2006 on a regular visa. He was given asylum 10 years later, but he was an anti-Islamist. His anger at Germany appeared to be directed towards authorities that he thought were not taking the concerns of anti-Islamist Saudi refugees seriously enough. In many respects, he was repeating the sort of far-right talking points that you get from parties like the AfD. So this is a very sort of weird case. There's a lot of details still to emerge, but it's not obvious to me what the political consequences of this might be. We have an election in 2 months. Germany, of course, is winding down for Christmas now. We'll see what the fallout from this is when everything renews in the new year. But I'd be sceptical about a major change in politics.
But Tom, whatever the driving political narrative behind Taleb al-Abdul Mohsen, and there are still lots of questions to be asked, the fact remains is that he was earmarked for deportation. And at that point, lawyers stepped in and stopped that deportation. So irrespective of why he carried out his attack, the fact of the matter remains, this is a case about a foreign national in Germany who clearly wished harm upon German nationals. For 3 years, this guy was flagged, and yet the state or the lawyers stepped in to prevent him facing justice. So while I hear what you're saying about whatever his background was, the fact of the matter is German people today are saying, many of them, once again, whose side are the lawyers on? And do we have a huge problem with uncontrolled immigration with often repeated tragic consequences?
Well, I mean, a few points on that. I don't think you're right to say he had been earmarked for deportation. There appears to have been a request from the Saudi authorities to deport him. German authorities, I think quite reasonably, were sceptical about that request from the Saudis. The Saudis obviously don't have a great track record when it comes to dealing with dissidents from their own country. What does appear to have happened is that there had been a number of tips that were sent to various different German authorities, including the refugee authority, about this guy. There is, and this is sort of unfolding by the hour, there does appear to be a history of kind of erratic, not quite violent, but certainly troubling behavior from this individual in different parts of Germany. He apparently threatened a terrorist attack back in 2013 in a row with authorities over medical test results because he was practicing as a doctor. There are huge questions to be answered by the authorities about why these tips weren't acted upon. There was a risk assessment last year. The state authorities in the state of Saxony-Anhalt, where Magdeburg is located, concluded apparently that there was no need for action. This is now the conversation in Germany. Should these tips have been acted upon? Were the authorities asleep at the wheel? But I think we're a long way from being able to provide conclusive answers to any of those questions at the moment.
Well, the logical conclusion to that would be yes, they should have intervened. And why didn't they? And there seems to be a pattern emerging once again. And there are people in Magdeburg. Magdeburg, as you will know better than I, has been very welcoming to immigrants from abroad, being in the east there where the housing stock is cheaper. It's found itself with a large population. There's been no problem. There's been no trouble. But when you start driving cars into Christmas markets, irrespective of political beliefs, ordinary rank and file people start standing up and saying, this has to stop. And the media's response and the politicians' response seems to be to label them far right. These people aren't far right. They're just fed up.
I mean, the entire country is in shock from this horrific attack, whether they're AfD voters or Green voters or Christian Democrats or whoever they are. I wouldn't sort of characterize the response to this in such sort of polarized language, really. It's, as I say, it's hard to draw clear-cut political conclusions from this attack because of what appeared to have been the beliefs and the background and the motivations of this guy. And by the way, there are strong indications, a lot of terrorism security experts are suggesting that if we look at some of the behavioral patterns, particularly in the last year or two from this individual, there's strong indications of sort of paranoia, beliefs in conspiracy theory. In other words, questions of mental health, which may be sort of more relevant to this than any particular idiosyncratic political beliefs that he appears to have held. But I don't think anybody's suggesting that for people to be upset and angry and concerned and to be asking very serious questions about this incident is problematic. They're the questions that everybody is asking today in Germany and that everybody wants answers to.
And Tom, there was a counter demo today at Magdeburg from a group saying, give hate no chance. But the point is, hate was given a chance because this guy wasn't reprimanded, he wasn't apprehended, he wasn't incarcerated, he wasn't deported, despite there being multiple red flags. Give hate no chance. That happened. Hate got a chance, and now people are dead because of it.
Yeah, I don't know what I can add other than to say that this is where the conversation in Germany is right now. I don't think there's any suggestion that the authorities after the event are not taking this seriously. So on December the 30th, in a few days' time, two committees of the Bundestag, the parliament, are going to be grilling the interior minister, the federal and state intelligence officials, and I think other officials who have had some peripheral connection with this case, to try to put the pieces together. One question is, because this case was so peculiar, is there a way in which it might have fallen between the gaps? If you're dealing with a far-right criminal, if you're dealing with an potential Islamist terrorist, if you're dealing with a far-left potential terrorist, then it might be clearer for authorities to know whose responsibility it is to deal with those. With a case like this, which doesn't fit into any of those silos, it may be, and I'm just speculating here, it may be that one authority was handing it over to another, thinking this is not our responsibility. A federal authority thinks, well, this belongs to the state, it doesn't belong to us. And in the end, all of these warnings, all these red flags that you rightly point out, were not acted upon because nobody quite knew whose responsibility it was to deal with it. Now, we don't know that that's the case, but it's certainly one possibility. It's something that's being discussed in Germany right now. And I think this is where the focus of discussion is going to be in the days and the weeks ahead. Were German authorities asleep at the wheel? Should they have acted on the warnings that we were getting about this individual?
Excellent stuff there. Thank you for joining us live from Berlin. That's a chief Germany correspondent at The Economist, Tom Nuttall. Thanks for your time. Excellent stuff. Now, loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, can't even give away mince pies without getting some Christmas stick. That's next. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. It's 5:34. These are your headlines from the GB Newsroom. The suspect accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson has pleaded not guilty. Luigi Mangione is facing 11 charges, including first-degree murder and terrorism. If convicted, the 26-year-old could face life in prison without parole. In addition to the state's case, a federal case against Mangione is running concurrently. One of the charges, murder through use of a firearm, would make him eligible for the death penalty if he's convicted. However, his defence attorneys called the situation highly unusual, noting conflicting theories between the state and federal cases. Sir Keir Starmer is heading abroad again over the new year after drawing criticism about his frequent overseas trips to various summits. The Prime Minister is enjoying his first Christmas in the role, and according to Number 10, he will spend time with his family over the coming days. However, instead of doing so at Downing Street or at their family home, the Starmers will head to the Grace and Favour country residence of Chequers in Buckinghamshire. After spending Christmas Day there, the Prime Minister and his family are going to head overseas. Germany's right-wing Alternative für Deutschland party is holding a rally in front of the Magdeburg Cathedral, near the scene of the Christmas market attack that killed 5 people and injured over 200. Police have arrested a 50-year-old Saudi doctor, identified by local media as Talib A, who lived in Germany since 2006. AfD is the second strongest party at present, polling at about 18 to 20% of the vote, or 10 to 15 points behind the centre-right Christian Democratic Union and its Bavarian sister party. King Charles will deliver this year's Christmas message from the Fitzrovia Chapel, a former hospital chapel in central London. It's the first time in over a decade the speech isn't recorded at a royal residence, with the King choosing the location to highlight healthcare workers and foster unity between faiths. The ornate 19th century chapel was once part of the Middlesex Hospital and now hosts exhibitions and community events. This year's message comes as the King continues treatment following a cancer diagnosis earlier in 2023. The speech will air on Christmas Day, and you can watch it on GB News TV and radio at 3 o'clock. Those are the latest GB News headlines, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2530 and €1.2033. The price of gold is £2,085 and 46 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,102 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A lot of cloud has arrived and will continue to spread across the rest of the UK during the rest of today, bringing drizzle and hill fog, but also bringing much milder weather in time for Christmas. This warm front is the culprit. That's what's bringing the thick and low cloud to much of the UK through the rest of the day, along with outbreaks of mostly light and patchy rain and drizzle, some heavier bursts particularly running along northern Scotland. And by the end of the night, we're all in this gloomy but mild airflow from the Atlantic. So grey skies, hill fog, patchy drizzle first thing, but temperatures of 8 to 12 Celsius. So unusually mild as we begin Christmas Eve compared with the time of year and compared with Christmas Eves gone by. A lot of that cloud will stick around as well throughout the morning. A few well, breaks in the clouds, some brighter interludes there to the east of higher ground, so parts of the Midlands and perhaps eastern England, eastern Scotland as well, seeing some brighter skies. But western Scotland certainly seeing a lot of thick cloud and outbreaks of persistent, at times moderate or heavy outbreaks of rain and drizzle. The drizzle, though, and the more persistent wet weather mostly confined to western Scotland by the afternoon. There will be a few spots over the Pennines, parts of Northern Ireland as well, but the further south and east you are, the drier it will be. There will be some brightness coming through, and with this mild wind direction, temperatures widely of 12 or 13 Celsius, could even see 14 or 15 degrees in one or two spots. So after that mild afternoon, we go into a very mild Christmas night. A lot of cloud cover, that cloud low covering the hills of the north and the west, and it's going to bring further drizzle, particularly for western Scotland, with a strengthening wind by the start of Christmas Day. But Christmas Day itself, very mild, mostly dry.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in Londonderry. The A29 remains closed at Mahara, just off the A6 at the scene of an accident near the Park and Ride turnoff. In Staffordshire, the A34 is partly blocked on the Walsall Road through Great Worley. This is just south of Cannock. There's been a collision at the junction at Norton Lane that's being recovered. And further south on the A34, in the outskirts of Birmingham at Sparkhill, the Stratford Road remains shut off Thornhill Road after a fire broke out inside a building this morning. Investigation works continue. On the train, services are suspended out of St Pancras to Bedford and Harpenden due to engineering works, and buses replace South Western trains. But in Effingham Junction and Guildford, where services divert via Woking between London Waterloo and Guildford due to emergency engineering works taking place at Clarendon. And for now, that is the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:41 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, was confronted over the withdrawal of winter fuel allowance by an angry pensioner whilst handing out, of all things, mince pies in her West Yorkshire constituency.
The thing is, you betrayed everything that everybody voted for you for, in everything. Well, smashing gangs, loads of rubbish, you know it, and you're going to house a load of them around here. We know you are. We know your plans.
Well, actually, do you know we're already...
Yeah,
we are already cutting the asylum hotels.
What about when you've got that photo done and all that with Waspy women?
Yeah, we are already...
You changed your mind with that.
We are already cutting the asylum hotels.
You know, you've got more.
No, we've actually been cutting them. We just announced there's the next 7 that's being cut.
And now you're going to try and stop people on donating. Everything's like changing. Yeah. You'll not get in next time with that. Good luck to you. That is so two-faced. Getting a mince pie out.
Yeah. It's a nice tradition.
No. Give them a blanket because they're freezing to death. They're freezing about.
Well, we can now speak with the former editor of the Sunday Express, David Wooding. David, welcome to the show. So it comes to something when you can't even give away a mince pie at Christmas. Of course, being a frontline politician is all about getting hijacked in this manner. Do you think they're being a bit unfair towards Yvette Cooper here?
Well, politicians need to face up to the people who voted them in, I'm afraid. And as long as there's no violence concern, then they're quite able to vent their frustrations. And I think that's what this woman was doing. She's venting the general frustration that people have with Labour right now. That's why they're so not behind in the polls, but I think their lead over the Conservatives is 0.5%. But they've gone from 44% down to 26.5% during 2024, which is astonishing. And that's all about what's perceived as broken promises, both to farmers, to pensioners. There's the WASPy women, as well as the 10 million pensioners who've had their winter fuel payments effectively cut. And then there's the increase in national insurance contributions. And a lot of people feel very let down by that. And I think this is one woman who feels exactly that.
And David, you raised some great points there about potential nightmares for the new year, let alone this lack of Christmas cheer. They don't even want a mince pie from the Home Secretary. But along those battle lines you just mentioned there, David, the winter fuel allowance, there are a significant number of constituencies across the UK with quite slim majorities for the Labour Party, where more people, a great deal in often cases, more people lost their winter fuel allowance than decide the majority. There are 100 rural seats where Labour MPs are now probably thinking they're the least popular person in the parish. And do you think that these kind of battlefronts could become a big problem for the Labour Party in the new year?
Yeah, it's telling, Martin, that this particular confrontation was in Yvette Cooper's own backyard. It was in her own constituency. And all this Labour landslide at 165-seat majority is very thin because lots of MPs were given their seats because people were voting for different parties, such as Reform and even the Greens and the Lib Dems, which was cutting back the Conservative lead. It was more people feeling disenchanted with the Conservatives than feeling, hey, Labour have got the answers. And these chickens are coming home to roost now. In fact, there's a petition which has got nearly 3 million signatures demanding a general election to hold Labour to account. And because it's gone over the threshold, this will have to be debated in Parliament on January the 6th. So there's another embarrassing moment for Keir Starmer when Parliament returns. And that's soon after that, coming fast, headlong round the corner, are the May local elections. Again, trouble for Keir Starmer and the Labour government. And the problem when you're in power is when things start going wrong, it's a bit like a football team when you go 2 goals behind, you're trying to get back in the game. It's very difficult because mistakes start being made that you don't expect to make. And Labour's got a lot of work to do to try and get back in the game.
David Wooding, it's a long way off yet, the next general election, but it's a very interesting seat, Pontefract, where Yvette Cooper is. In 2019, weirdly, she was only kept in power because the Brexit Party did so well and split the Conservative vote, you could argue. Do you think, like, looking way, way ahead here, like, nobody, perhaps even cabinet ministers, the Home Secretary, might be safe at the next election because there could be a huge insurgency. And as you say, David, if you start off on a bad footing this first 6 months, quite hard to shake that reputation off.
Yes, if you start looking through all the election results from July, you'll find lots of MPs, Conservatives as well as Labour MPs, had stonking big majorities reduced to just a few hundred. Some people I know, surprisingly, I thought they'll walk home. They were down to about 200 or 300 votes. So all it needs is a little bit more of a swing against them and they're out again. Or, of course, in Labour's situation, these MPs who got in seats where they normally don't stand a chance, they'll find it difficult next time to try and hold on to those seats. So a lot can happen. And 4 years, it comes around very quickly, you know, Martin. Time flies, particularly when you're having a bad time and you've got to get on the front foot. And the big thing Labour have bet all the money on is to turn the economy round, to get all the public finances in place. And the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has told us that one of the reasons she's had to cut the winter fuel allowance is because we need to get the finances on a better footing. Now, if things don't start turning round as a result of that, then all of that is going to go down the pan. I mean, for instance, there's the CBI were yesterday saying that the situation is grim, the outlook is awful. I can't remember what the phrase was they used, but it was saying there's going to be no growth, inflation is going to grow, and it's in a worse situation than when Liz Truss delivered her botched budget.
Beautiful stuff. We have to leave it there. It's a nightmare before Christmas for Yvette Cooper, but a very Merry Christmas to you. David Wooding, thank you very much for joining us. Now, to remind you, my colleague Patrick Christys, he's got the lady on his show who confronted Yvette Cooper there over those mince pies. Sink your teeth into that later on, because that's on from 9 p.m. only on GB News. Patrick Christys tonight. He's got the mince pie madam on his show. Now, moving on, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's a forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations this year.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast brought to you by the Met Office. We'll see an east-west split weather-wise across southern parts of Europe over the next few days. Mostly fine in the west, more unsettled further east. Could see a few showers on Christmas Eve across the Canaries, but for much of Iberia, it's set fair, plenty of sunshine around here. And then we run into more unsettled conditions across southeastern parts of Europe. Some wind, some rain, even some hill snow in places. And that east-west split continues as we go through the Christmas period. Further unsettled weather to come in the east, generally fine the further west you are.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Christmas canapé offers partygoers a small treat that staves off hunger and soaks up the fizz. Founder and host of Crazy Sexy Food, Hannah Harley-Young, joins me now with a toothsome selection. Lovely to see you, Hannah.
You too.
Origin of the word canapé?
Yes, French. Sort of from the, yeah, of course, from sort of the 1800s. It means sofa. So it's sort of playing on the analogy of someone sitting or lying on a sofa. It is about the garnish, traditionally sitting on a piece of stale bread or pastry. Obviously, it's evolved over the years. I don't have any stale bread for you, don't worry. But the idea is that it's something sort of garnish, something exciting sitting on a vehicle that you can put in your mouth in 1 or 2 bites.
It's obviously post-war. What is it? Is it 60s or 70s? How long have we been eating these things?
I would say around about then. And I think what's interesting, I mean, I always look towards even the 80s, a little bit sort of... later on, where it's where you sort of have that sort of the classic vol au vent, which was, you know, a little bit dry, a little bit tasteless, and I think that's why I've brought a real selection for you to show you how far we've come. Another traditional one, obviously, being your pigs in blankets. I'm going to hold off for a second before I choke. Another thing that I have to say about canapés, there are a few little tips that I must give people super quickly. Make sure they're small. 1 or 2 bites. When you're at a party, you're standing, you've got a glass in one hand, you need to hold it. There. OK, I would have preferred a glass of wine, but, you know, I can't stand these canapés where I have to put the glass down in order to eat the food. I want to do it all at once.
I couldn't agree more. You should never eat more than you can lift.
Exactly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Jingle bells, more like jingle smells. The stinker of a new survey shows that millions of Brits have no plans to shower between Christmas and New Year this year. Now, to talk about this, I'm joined by the comedian John Martin. John, over to you.
Martin, great to see you again, my friend. I'm not in a good mood, I'll be honest with you. I took my 6-year-old nephew to see Father Christmas earlier. Oh, it was terrible. Unkempt hair, shirt hanging out, stinking of beer and cigarettes. God knows what Father Christmas thought of him. but we're here. No, I'm not in a good mood. I've just spent 10 minutes waving to my next door neighbour, and then I realised she was only cleaning her windows. So I'm not in a good mood. But you want me to talk about smells? I'm glad about that, because I'm an expert on that in my act. I do animal impressions. I don't do the noises, I do the smells. So I'm an expert at this. My wife wanted some perfume for Christmas, so I got her some from the airport, actually. Just in a little bottle. It's called Tester. So I got her some of that. And then she said she wanted Chanel number 5. But I've not held back. I've gone for the whole lot. I've even included the Sky Sports package with it. So I've got a Chanel number 1, 5, everything.
All right, John, I'm afraid we've simply run out of time. We've got to stop you mid-flow there. And I was about to say myself, sing some smelly Christmas songs in the reek midwinter, ding pong, merrily on high, honk the herald angels, Ming. Look, it's Jubes & Co up next with Miriam Cates, but I'm back at 7 till 8. I'm coming for Farage tonight. I'll see you back then. Have a great time, and God rest ye smelly gentlemen. See you later.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Increasingly gloomy during the next 24 hours, a lot of low cloud, drizzle and some hill fog too. But it's also going to be very mild, certainly as far as Christmas Eve and Christmas Day go. We've had this warm front moving in from the west through the day. That's brought the cloud, it's brought some outbreaks of rain, and those outbreaks of rain are continuing to work their way east across the UK. And with a lot of cloud overnight, as well as this mild wind direction, it's going to be a case of temperatures rising through the night and not falling, so 9 to 12 Celsius first thing Christmas Eve. It's going to be grey and misty outside first thing as well. A lot of hill fog in the west with some patchy drizzle and some more persistent rain affecting western Scotland in particular, along with a strengthening wind. 12, perhaps even 13 Celsius though during Christmas Eve morning. Remarkably mild for the time of year. If there is any brightness to be had, it'll be eastern Scotland, eastern England, perhaps parts of the Midlands and the South East, as well as eastern parts of Northern Ireland. But any brighter intrudes will be short-lived. Most places will see extensive cloud cover. That cloud will be covering the hills and coasts in the west, so grey, misty conditions and some drizzle here and there. But by the afternoon, actually, much of the south will be dry, away from hills and coasts in the west. And actually, with highs of 12 or 13 Celsius and lighter winds in the south, it won't feel too unpleasant. But further north, the winds are going to strengthen. And it's going to be a windy start to Christmas Day across northwest Scotland in particular, with some wet weather around. Elsewhere across the country, most places on Christmas Day will be dry, albeit rather cloudy again, and once more, very mild. Temperatures gradually decrease during Boxing Day and into the weekend, but it stays mostly dry.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Londonderry continue at Maharar. The A29 remains closed just south of the A6 by the Park and Ride turn-off. Investigation works are underway following a serious accident. Moving into the West Midlands now, in the outskirts of Birmingham, just south of the city centre at Sparkhill. The A34, the Stratford Road, that's still closed off at the scene of a fire that broke out in the early hours of this morning off Thornhill Road. Investigation works continue. Now, on the trains, services are suspended out of St Pancras from London up to Bedford and Harpenden due to engineering works until Christmas Eve. Tomorrow, and southeastern trains have been suspended in Kent, Dover Priory to Folkestone Central due to problems with the signals. And all Skybus flights are suspended between Land's End and the Isles of Scilly due to the adverse weather we're just hearing. And that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 6 p.m. You're watching GB News and I'm Miriam Cates. Coming up on Jubes & Co in the next hour, is Britain on the verge of recession? The latest figures from the ONS show the size of the UK economy has shrunk since Labour took power in July. Flagging business confidence, a fall in private sector hiring and sluggish retail sales have all been blamed for the slump. Does this mean more tax rises in the spring, or could growth be just around the